When it comes to stories, some games have dropped the ball hard, where even the best game mechanics can't stop us from wanting to look at the car crash. The writers have the gall to call a plot. Although not all bad stories are created equal. There's of course the bad, then there's the bad story in a great game, which hits just as hard as the great story in a bad game, and then you have Tetris. One of the worst stories I've seen in a video game. Falling blocks? Seriously? But why does any of this matter? Don't we play games for the game? Well, stories are pretty important. After all, they're how we connect with games on a level that isn't just the gameplay. Whether it's as simple as Peach being in another castle, or whatever was going on in this game, a good story makes for an even better experience. Which leads us back to Kingdom Hearts, a game that was designed with one question in mind. What if a Disney fever dream had lore? With a narrative that's as confusing as a Rubik's Cube, and tangled up in so many plot threads it might as well be a ball of yarn. How am I getting this off me, bro? Kingdom Hearts' story isn't confusing because it's some deep Inception level mindbender, no. It's simply a mess, with prequels to sequels and sequels to prequels, all making sure to change the rules just as you've begun to understand the joke of a plot. I dare you, take a shot every time Nomura has decided to retcon the story. You'll die. In your heart of hearts, pun fully intended, you can't deny that Kingdom Hearts is clearly being thrown together as it goes along. Gone is a simple story about friendship and darkness, replaced with time travel, convoluted timelines, alternate realities, and meaningless plot twists. Got it memorized? By the time you figured out who's a Heartless, who's a nobody, and why there are about 17 different versions of every character running around, you're way beyond the psychiatrist, buddy. It's time to get checked in. Have fun in that padded room while you wait another 14 years and 8 side games for Kingdom Hearts 4. Then there's Sonic, where now that I think about it, the real villain isn't Dr. Eggman, it's the writers. Let's see, we had Sonic dying and being resurrected by a kiss from a human princess. Not gonna talk about the implications there. Sonic deciding to unleash a group of deadly, cringe-worthy enemies because Eggman wasn't a big enough problem. Sonic being unable to outrun bad fanfiction plots. Shadow picking up a gun. Forgot about that. Sonic getting tortured for months, but when we see him again, he's the same old wisecracking Sonic with zero emotional trauma, and I mean, that whole game felt like the writers were flipping a coin to decide the tone. We had a Sonic game where the entire story unfolds on a white backdrop, a lot like my own videos. Another that everyone praised but in actuality was as deep as a puddle. Sonic Boom.
Look, ramps!
We can use these as ramps!
I mean, get real. Get real. Real enough to admit that poking fun at Sonic storylines is some serious low-hanging fruit. Do you get the point? Do you get the point? Can anyone get anything without playing Deadly Premonition? A game with a story so bad, it's actually good. Super cheesy but super serious. Awful pacing, cliches on top of cliches on top of cliches. A protagonist who's as subtle as a brick to the face, and dialogue that makes you question a lot of things, really. Yeah, some players might scream about the game's charm, but you can't with a straight face deny its lack of substance. Where Twin Peaks, the game's inspiration, had character depth, narrative cohesion, appropriate tone, atmosphere, pacing, structure, this game has none. But what it does have is pretty funny. And to be honest, a lot of these games with bad stories are quite fun to play. Just Cause's story is terrible in every way, but who cares when I can do this? Ride to Hell Retribution is a terrible game where you ride, have sex, shoot people, and have even more sex, but its absurdity alone makes for a great watch online. Resident Evil stories are absurdly goofy when you think about it for too long, but who doesn't want to see people do the impossible? Both Mirror's Edge titles have plots that feel like they were written on a coffee break. However, I can do parkour. As for the Sniper Elite game, there's no story. Just deliver the most dramatic slow-motion kill shots to people's balls. Please. And can you with a straight face tell me you wouldn't want to play this?
You know what this means. It was your job to collect them from the students.
I'm so sorry.
Where's the scroll?
I don't know!
Listen to me. Master Cainith is asking questions. We need to find it. Now.
I'm so sorry!
This
Regardless,
isn't just our
not
job.
every game can get away with having a bad story. This next part is gonna hit like a train. The Last of Us 2 has a bad story. It has to be said. And yeah, painfully aware I'm the latest in a long line of about 1, 2, 3, 4, a billion people to say it. The Last of Us was a beautiful game about two people coming together, a tale of forgiveness, teaching that life never ends, it only continues, emphasizing the importance of redeeming ourselves in the present, allowing us to flee from the past. Joel, a man who lost everything, Ellie, an unloved teenager. Through the game's events, they find what they're missing in one another, only for the second game to deliver a weak and shallow revenge plot. Now, I don't necessarily have an issue with the sequel story or its characters, it just should have been the third game. Let me cook. The Last of Us 2 should have been The Last of Us 3, resulting in a sequel solely about two people being pulled apart because of Joel's fatal decision. The lie. You spend the first game building a seemingly unbreakable bond, only to watch that bond, one you fought for and protected, get ripped apart by you, the player. Just imagine a game where as Joel you keep lying again and again and again, only to witness Ellie's slow realization of the truth, building to a climax where she wants nothing to do with you. And now, having ruined everything, the game ends with Joel dying at the hands of Abby, without the player knowing much about who she is, rather than him dying just an hour into The Last of Us 2. The third game would start and focus more on Abby's backstory, anthology style, doing a better job at humanizing her, a better job at making her more relatable, showing us why her journey matters, building a sturdier bridge between her and the player, and most importantly, giving us real reasons to care about her plight, about the WLF, about everything, answering the grueling questions intentionally left unanswered by the second game, that she is the daughter of the doctor we brutally killed, building intrigue and feeding into Ellie's revenge plot, so that when the two characters finally clash, the player doesn't just care about Ellie, but cares almost equally about Abby. You're now a hopeless third party watching as two beloved characters you control go neck and neck. Naughty Dog had a vision. I see it, I want to like it, but what was the goal? The sequel we got left me with an experience where I didn't even get to know Abby properly. I had no time to even get acquainted. She was introduced as a villain, and for many players the game ended with her still as a villain. Joel, a painfully interesting and flawed character, was killed off almost immediately, and Ellie was reduced to nothing but a vengeful brat. The disservice The Last of Us 2 did to its story and its characters perfectly illustrates a ruined narrative, one that could have been as impactful and emotionally driven as the first, bringing the fan base closer together instead of dividing it. Talking about division, this next take isn't gonna divide anyone but me. People say story doesn't matter in Souls-like games. I disagree, especially in the case of Elden Ring, which has one of the biggest open worlds ever made. Now, most FromSoft games use an if you know you know approach to storytelling, and Miyazaki, the lead developer for most of these titles, is on record saying that he wants the player to make up a lot of the story in their heads, which is fair. Vague and indirect storytelling is something I admire, something I love. But here's the thing, most FromSoft games are linear. Why is this important? You see, a story is a lot like having solid ground to stand on. Without it, you'll find it's pretty hard to walk, though not impossible. In a linear game where everything is relatively close to the player's position, it's not just easier to find the story the developers are hiding, but a lot easier to progress through the game without much thought. But in Elden Ring, brother, who knows where anything is hidden in this vast open world? Are you kidding me? Who is this guy? Why is this place? What the heck is this thing? It's too easy to completely miss the meat, the bigger picture. Too hard to digest anything with so much on your plate. No wonder people either dislike the game for having no story, which is insane, or even worse, had no clue what the story was even about. With a world this massive, having a clear and strong narrative will not only make the world feel a lot smaller and manageable, but would also help pull players through it, allowing them to feel more involved, giving them more of a reason to defeat every boss and take on every challenge. I get that FromSoft doesn't want to spoon feed you and wants to make an adult game, but the lack of cutscenes, minimal NPC interaction, very brief conversations, and no journal to track interactions left me feeling extremely detached. Let's be real, most of us had to research Elden Ring lore just to understand the game's world, characters, and story. We all had Vadi Vidya on loop, and if that's what's required to understand your narrative, all I can say is that Elden Ring has a magnificent story that's ruined by the way it's told. Whatever, don't care, shut up, the game's still great. Yeah, you'd be right. I mean, just look at this, how could it not be? Plus, as mentioned before, it's not uncommon for good games to stumble in the storytelling department. It happens to the best of them. Still, it's painful to think how much better these games could have been with a solid narrative to anchor them. Take Marvel's Spider-Man, proof that a truly gripping narrative can elevate everything around it, with immaculate storytelling, strong character development, and a portrayal of Peter Parker and Spider-Man that is honestly some of the best we've seen for the character. It was perfect, flawless, and unrivaled. Then Marvel's Spider-Man 2 came out, and despite being better in almost every way, the story suffered, barely holding a candle to the first game. The game was rushed, and unfortunately the plot reflected that hard. It felt hurried, as if it had somewhere else to be. Characters weren't properly utilized, had arcs that weren't earned or were extremely unsatisfying, with certain characters, Peter, being derailed for plot convenience. And ultimately, it felt like two narratives crammed into one. A story that could have benefited from taking its time and focusing on what worked, rather than trying to deliver what the fans thought they wanted. But hey, at least it wasn't Ever experienced a game with a story that's not bad, not great, not okay, just painfully boring? Yeah. Me too. Starfield, with all its ambition, had me constantly checking the clock, realizing that I wasn't getting any closer to the end of the game, but rather to the edge of insanity. As much as I loved elements of Starfield, man, what a mess. Who needs a coherent narrative when you can just follow a series of fetch quests like a dog? Go here, over there, talk to this guy, pick up that item, do the— hold up. At what point am I supposed to get invested in this story? Never? Oh. Okay. Dry dialogue paired with even drier animations, a superb talent at evoking absolutely nothing with its storytelling. No surprise the game fell flat on its face. Sure, this approach worked with Bethesda's older titles, but in the case of Starfield, it was too boring to complete. Fetch quests and a glorified snooze fest. Isn't that just a descriptor for pretty much every modern Ubisoft game? You know, where every title shares the same story beat for beat, dropped into a sprawling open world only to realize that the only story being told is the one of you wasting your hard-earned cash on yet another Ubisoft game. Or is it painting a perfect picture of Ghostwire Tokyo, a game that is so utterly boring? Yes, the gameplay is fun, quirky, and creative. Yes, the game is visually stunning. Yes, the game has a pretty impressive portrayal of Tokyo's Shibuya, but I couldn't care less. I wouldn't care if I was able to see the protagonist's insides, rendered at full 4K with the highest poly counts known to man. Why care when everything is so painfully repetitive? When the story is subservient to the game's open world busywork and side quests that waste your time? The way in which you explore, the enemies you fight, it's all recycled. It looks cool? Alright, well just know that after about an hour, it becomes utterly redundant. Save the city, save your sister, buddy. Leave her to rest along with all of Tokyo because the story ain't even worth playing. Not remotely interesting. Alright, might as well throw an actual horror game into the mix, get a little freaky with it. Scorn, to put it simply, is a game. That is in fact the head of a penis. A game with a story that's mesmerizingly beautiful, thought-provoking, and painful to watch. Gross as hell, only it doesn't have a story, and I just lied. If story's what you want, try the art book. Because in Scorn, you don't know what's going on, and you're not supposed to know. Which is a real shame because the game has a lot of fascinating lore, but again, try the art book. And get this, any story that is found in the game itself is buried underneath a world of boredom. Middling gameplay, a clunky combat system, and tedious puzzles. Now I get that subtlety exists, games don't have to focus on story if they don't want to, but if Scorn has gameplay that's lacking, dull ass puzzles, and no story, what's left? Look, I'm in no way dense. Not every game needs a great story to be fun. Some of us just love a game for its gameplay loop, mindless action to help pass the time. But when a story falls flat and it has no gameplay of note to fall back on, it leaves a mark. A missed opportunity to have elevated a gaming experience beyond simply pressing buttons and having spectacles play out on screen. Storytelling is an art where weaving complex narratives, building worlds, and— oh, get over yourself, dude. No one cares. Criminy. This guy, man. Like, no one cares about what he's talking. Does he not? I'm gonna put it on my YouTube channel, get 50 views. Like, no, it's not. I'm sorry. He's just always yapping and just like. This isn't a bad game. This also isn't a bad game. Their stories? Debatable. Now, a key issue with these games is this. Their narratives only, and I mean only, exist to serve the gameplay. This isn't ideal, as gameplay and story should complement each other. When one outweighs the other, it throws the balance off. For instance, if there's too much freedom, you'll find that the story may falter in like direction. On the flip side, if the story becomes too complex, you risk neutering the freedom these games allow. Breath of the Wild and by extension Tears of the Kingdom have stories that are far too simple because the developers are obsessed with open-ended game design. They have chosen freedom over narrative depth, seemingly forgetting that having inhibitors, limits and boundaries that tell the player no isn't always a bad thing. And that by doing so, you might find that the balance between freedom and story becomes much easier to achieve. When you insist on your game boiling down to complete these 4 main objectives in any order before facing the final boss without any meaningful constraints, how can you effectively tell a story that isn't non-existent or forgettable? Stonewalled behind memories, flashbacks, side quests, and shallow exposition. It makes you wish we'd scale back the ambition and the ego, returning to a smaller Hyrule with a richer story and a more diverse range of content. One that doesn't limit character interaction or dynamic storytelling, allowing players to engage with the narrative on a deeper level. A game that doesn't feel the need to impress with its size, but rather with its execution. Screw Hyrule, screw the depths. I would have much preferred a game that only took place in the sky. The Sky Islands are without a doubt the best part of Tears of the Kingdom, so just imagine if the entire game took place way up there, with countless distinct islands to explore, each with its own identity, backed by a story where you journey from one Sky Island to another, gradually ascending towards a Hyrule castle high above the clouds, straight up Laputa style. Instead of a few scattered islands above the same Hyrule we explored in Breath of the Wild, mind you. And that's the thing, Tears of the Kingdom is a great game with an okay story that lacks anything truly special or memorable. Just like Breath of the Wild, they turned what could have been a great story into a superficial tool merely bolstering open world exploration. Credit where credit is due, however. At least the Zelda team is trying new things and taking creative risks. Because there's nothing worse than never wanting to do anything more than what's expected of you. None of us, and I mean none of us, play Pokémon for the plot, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't be appreciated. Everyone says it, but Pokémon Black and White has one of the best stories in the entire series. For the simple fact that it said, you know what, let's say something. Let's do more with this insane world we've created. As a result, we got a Pokemon game with an unexpected amount of depth to its narrative. There was more to latch onto, more to care about than just catching them all. And yet the Pokemon franchise often falls back into familiar patterns, recycling the same stories with little to no innovation. You battle the evil team, collect gym badges, and face off against the champion every single time. Black and White challenged the status quo by tackling themes of morality and identity. Characters like N and Team Plasma added layers to the story, forcing players to confront the ethical implications of catching Pokemon. It was refreshing, a much needed departure that gave players something to think about. But that ambition, for some reason, abruptly ended with Black and White. Now, games have come out since then that many argue are written to perfection, doing what Black and White could only dream of. Sun and Moon, for example, is loved for its story, only it didn't resonate with me at all, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Scarlet and Violet, the latest in the Pokemon franchise, is heralded for being absolute cinema. Only problem being that said cinema looks awful, good grief those textures, runs awful, and clearly wants to die. Regardless, these games do have somewhat strong narratives, but try this on for size. It's easy to enjoy a bad meal when you're starving. Both Generation 7 and 9 came out immediately after a generation that had nothing to show story-wise. This, I feel, plays into how we perceive these titles narratively, because these games and their stories are good, but they're not great. And if that Pokemon label wasn't there to prop them up, would we praise these games so heavily? There was a magic to Black and White story that I feel always seems to be missing from a lot of these newer games. A desire not just to have a passable narrative, but to craft a story with purpose and depth. When it comes to Pokemon, I personally refuse to commend mediocrity when the franchise has everything in the world to reach excellence. But hey, it sells, so why try too hard? There's no point in creating a stellar plot that resonates with fans and outsiders alike, but most of us continue to settle for the bare minimum, that being nothing at all. Well, at least the Pokemon story is extremely easy to follow, allowing children everywhere to fall in love with these critters. As there are some games where you really don't know left from right. Games like Control, Fahrenheit, Bioshock Infinite, where you ask yourself, what on earth is going on in the story? I love Death Stranding, I really do. I mean, I own a literal Cupid. But to this day, I still don't quite understand what I played. Kojima, bless his heart, we love him. The man has a talent for world building that's inspiring. And I get that a Kojima game is often an experience, but when it comes to writing, someone needs to take away his keyboard, pen, paper, and any napkins he may scribble on. Death Stranding is fascinating, but navigating its plot is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. It meanders too much, is needlessly confusing, and leaves you constantly chasing the narrative for all the wrong reasons. That isn't to say I couldn't follow it. Most of my assumptions about the story turned out to be spot on as it progressed. Nevertheless, ask most fans about the plot and you'll hear them say, everything will make sense by the end. But why? What's the point? Why stretch out a narrative to such a breaking point where it all must be thrown up at the game's conclusion? Why do all the characters feel so detached, not resembling real people at all? And it doesn't look like the sequel will be any better. It's as if they stumbled out of some pompous art school. Guilty. Mere exposition devices that spout riddles, like how the fuck? Also, why is the plot so heavy-handed, communicating emotions and ideas in the most disjointed ways possible? I get it, the game has its themes I've explored a lot. Primarily death, who would have thought, human connection, and the nature of existence. But you don't have to wrap those concepts in so many layers of empty symbolism that it becomes distracting. I think a good story is one that can be understood. This does not mean it has to be simple and straightforward, it just means there's a level of clarity. It's similar to the difference between flowery language and plain language. One is elaborate and overly descriptive, while the latter is simple and direct. The kicker being that both styles can achieve the same impact, you just have to know how to write well. Because oftentimes flowery language is used as an attempt to sound sophisticated or smart. And I'm really sorry, that's what Kojima's work often reminds me of. Because when all is said and done, there's absolutely no reason for anything to be so unnecessarily intricate and pretentious. At least it isn't soulless. At least a game like Death Stranding has heart. At least most of the games mentioned in this video, while flawed, have something to say. Something that isn't self-righteous or overly political, something untouched by corporate interference, something with a glimpse of passion from the developers. So you know what? Even bad stories have their place. Of course, some games will have narratives that aren't even worth the time of day. Others will have painfully missed the mark. Some will have stories so bad they're good, but they make us laugh, cringe, and sometimes even think. At the end of it all, the bad is just as important as the good. Seeing the footprints that lead toward failure helps others walk towards success. Despite this, we should all care about the art of storytelling in video games, as we live in a time where games are more than just games. They are a powerful medium capable of telling stories in ways that movies, books, or TV shows simply can't. You observe art, you read a book, you watch a film. But when you're playing a game, you're in it, part of that experience. You're able to interact with the world presented to you, allowing for a level of immersion that honestly, I feel we haven't even begun to tap into. So when those stories fail to connect, it's more than just a disappointment. It's a step backwards, because a game with a great story doesn't just enhance great gameplay, it elevates it to a whole other level, becoming a platform that offers a glimpse into worlds far beyond our own, creating an emotional foundation that keeps us invested long after we've walked away from the keyboard or put down the controller. A great story isn't just something you watch or read, it's something you feel. And that's the magic of it all. Whether good or bad, it's the stories that stay with us, shaping the games we remember, the worlds we get lost in, and the moments we keep coming back to. Alright. That's all, folks.